The morgue was silent, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. The air was sharp and metallic, heavy with disinfectant and the chill of death. Dr. Lin Wei adjusted his gloves, the thin latex whispering against his fingers, and stared at the still body lying on the stainless steel table. Menglong, a name that had once filled concert halls and lit up screens, now reduced to pale form beneath the sterile light. His expression was disturbingly calm, almost as if he had simply fallen asleep. But Dr. Lin had seen enough corpses to know when something didn't fit. He took a slow breath and began the second autopsy. The first examination, performed under pressure and haste, had concluded that Yu's death was accidental, a fall from a balcony. No sign of struggle, no foul play. It was the kind of report that satisfied the public for a moment and buried inconvenient questions. Yet the rumors never stopped. Fans whispered about missing footage from the hotel, inconsistencies in the time of death, and that strange bruise along his jawline that didn't look like a fall. It was enough to force the police to reopen the file and assign Lin, one of the country's most meticulous forensic pathologists, to perform a new examination. The bulb flickered. A faint vibration traveled through the metal tray as Lin drew the first incision. The sound of the scalpel was clean, surgical, final. His assistant, Mei, handed him instruments in silence, eyes wide and unblinking. They had both seen celebrity cases before, but this one felt different. It felt watched. "Check the hands again," Lin said quietly. Mei hesitated, then carefully lifted the right hand beneath the light. The nails were trimmed. Traces of something glimmered along the edges, almost invisible to the naked eye. Lin leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. Under magnification, he saw it, a fine residue. Dark gray, almost metallic. Headed beneath the nails as if the victim had clawed at something rough before he died. "This wasn't in the first report," Mei whispered. Didn't answer. He took a sterile swab and pressed it carefully against the residue, sealing it inside a glass vial. He turned to the record file. The original autopsy had noted no foreign material present. That statement was now invalid. As they continued, more inconsistencies emerged. A faint contusion on the right wrist, half hidden beneath the lividity, shaped like a grip mark. Slight misalignment in the neck vertebrae. Not typical for a fall. Even the skull fracture pattern suggested lateral force rather than downward impact. Each finding carved away at the official story, piece by piece. At 3:12 a.m., Lin finally removed his gloves and stared at the table. The room smelled of alcohol, iodine, and quiet revelations. "This man didn't fall," he said under his breath. "He was pushed, or worse." Up sharply. "You can't write that." "Not yet." "I won't," Lin said, but the words trembled. "Not until we know what that metallic dust is." He sent the sample for analysis with strict confidentiality. Only 3 people were aware: Lin, Mei, and the chief coroner. Yet by the next morning, someone else clearly knew. The first headline appeared online before dawn: "New autopsy underway in Menglong's case, source says inconsistencies found by noon." Every news channel was speculating. Social media overflowed with hashtags. Fans posting old photos, theories, and accusations. Some claimed the hotel was covering up a scandal. Others said Yu had been involved in a private dispute. Dr. Lin ignored it all and buried himself in the report. The deeper he went, the more impossible it became to dismiss the clues. Under ultraviolet light, faint streaks appeared along the victim's forearm, thin, linear, and parallel. Marks from electrical contact. He frowned. These weren't caused by a fall either. The next day, the lab report arrived. He opened it in his office. A single-page summary marked confidential, forensic analysis. The residue contained traces of barium and tungsten, elements commonly found in electrical detonators and certain forms of defense-grade stun devices. It wasn't residue from a railing or wall. It was something man-made, and violent. Lin exhaled slowly. His hands were shaking. "So it was no accident," he murmured. But before he could share his conclusion, his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Some stories end badly." He froze. The morgue's corridor stretched before him, long and dim, lined with metal doors. At the far end, one turned the corner, a silhouette. Gone before he could call out. That night, the temperature outside dropped sharply. Lin couldn't sleep. The image of Menglong's calm face haunted him, the serenity of someone whose story had been rewritten. He replayed the details in his mind, the metallic dust, the wrist mark, the bruise. Each piece pointed to a hand unseen, a truth deliberately buried. He returned to the morgue the following evening, long after everyone else had left. The building was empty, the echo of his footsteps following him like a shadow. In the examination room, the stainless table was clean, the instruments arranged neatly. Only the faintest trace of disinfectant lingered in the air. He placed a vial of residue under the microscope again. Particles glowed faintly under the fluorescent beam, microscopic, sharp-edged, unnatural. Realized it wasn't just residue. It was a fragment. Something had broken on contact, a piece of a weapon, perhaps, or an electrical device used at close range. Hum filled the room. Lin straightened, looking toward the ceiling light. It flickered once, then steadied. For a moment, thought he heard movement behind the door. But when he turned, there was nothing. Just silence, heavy and waiting. In his notebook, he wrote, "This contradicts initial findings. Potential external interference. Must identify source of metallic residue." He paused before closing the file. The word interference didn't seem strong enough. This wasn't interference, it was intent. The next morning, he met with Chief Coroner Zhao in the small conference room adjacent to the lab. Zhao's tone was flat, detached. "Your preliminary notes. You're implying homicide." "I'm implying the first report was incomplete," Lin replied. Zhao's eyes hardened. "Careful what you imply. There's pressure from above to close this case." Lin's jaw tightened. Pressure from whom? I didn't answer. He simply gathered the papers and left the room. That evening, Lin received another message. This time with an attachment, a blurred photograph of himself leaving the morgue. The text read, "We warned you." He locked his phone and stared out the window. The city beyond was alive with light. Unaware that one of its idols had perhaps been silenced not by fate, but by hands still free. Days later, a journalist leaked that a classified report mentioned metallic traces found on Menglong's body. The public exploded. Comments flooded every platform. "He was murdered, they're hiding something, where's the truth?" Lin walked through the morgue corridors again. The noise of the outside world muffled by thick concrete walls. He stopped before Menglong's storage unit, tracing the cold metal door with his fingertips. "I don't know who did this," he whispered. "Find out." Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the glass like quiet applause. Across the street, a car engine idled. Inside, he sat watching the morgue entrance, a cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. When the door opened and Lin stepped into the rain, the cigarette ember died, crushed beneath a boot, and the car pulled away into the dark. The truth had been disturbed, and someone, somewhere, was already moving to bury it again. The storm that had started that night never really ended. It rained for days, not hard, but constant, a gray drizzle that soaked the city in unease. Every news broadcast still opened with Menglong's face, smiling, golden, frozen in the last image before his death. Beneath it, headline pulsed like a heartbeat, "New autopsy evidence discovered, investigation reopened." Dr. Lin Wei hadn't slept in 72 hours. Sat alone in his apartment, the blinds drawn. The lab report open on the table. The residue beneath Yu's nails, that metallic dust, was still on his mind. The analysis confirmed traces of barium and tungsten. But the ratios were strange. It wasn't industrial waste. It was engineered. Purposeful. Someone had used the device on Menglong, something compact, powerful, meant to incapacitate quickly. One could almost imagine the scene, the shock, the collapse, the silence afterward. But imagination wasn't proof. And proof was what would get him silenced. His phone rang. It was May. His trembled. "They're saying the report doesn't exist anymore," she whispered. "Entire file's gone. Someone erased it from the morgue server." Lin's heart dropped. "That's impossible. I saved 2 copies. Both are missing." Stood up, pacing. The city outside his window flickered with the neon light. "Listen carefully, May. Do not come back to the lab tonight. Stay home. Whatever happens, do not answer calls from unknown numbers." The line went dead. At the same moment, in the newsroom of the Herald Post, journalist Hong Kiao was staring at an anonymous email. The subject line read, "If you want the truth about Menglong, follow the dust." Attached was a single photo, a blurred image of Lin holding the vial of residue. There was no explanation, no sender. Coordinates scribbled in the message body, an old industrial district outside the city, near an abandoned recording studio. Didn't hesitate. She grabbed her camera and left. Meanwhile, the police held a quiet press conference. Chief Inspector Wren stood before a dozen flashing cameras, his expression stiff. The current findings, he said, show no conclusive evidence of criminal activity in the death of Mr. Yu Menglong. When a reporter shouted about the metallic traces, Wren smiled coldly. Rumors. Misinterpretations. We advise the public not to spread misinformation. But behind the scenes, officers were already questioning staff, confiscating files, and sealing the morgue's restricted zone. Arrived that night to find his access card disabled. In suits waited by the entrance, arms crossed. Dr. Lin, we've been instructed to escort you off the premises, one said. Under whose order? Lin demanded. Central Forensic Authority. He didn't argue. He simply looked once more through the glass at the hallway that led to the autopsy room, now dark and locked, before turning away. That same evening, Han Kiao reached the coordinates from the email. The district was silent. The air thick with the smell of rust and oil. The recording studio stood half collapsed. Its windows shattered. Its walls stained with mold. Inside, dust floated like ash in the beam of her flashlight. In the main room, she found old posters of Yu Menglong, his early days. For fame. Beside them, a chair was overturned, and cables lay coiled like snakes across the floor. Her light caught something else, a scorched mark on the wall, circular, small, blackened. She crouched down. Metal was melted in a perfect ring. It was the same residue. She took photos, uploaded them to a private drive, and turned to leave, but froze. Faint sound echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Someone else was there. Who's there? She called out. Answer. Only the creak of a loose floorboard. Then the sound stopped. When Han finally stepped outside, the rain had grown heavier. Her car windshield was fogged, and for a moment she thought she saw a shape in the reflection, someone standing behind her. She spun around. Nothing but rain and shadows. She drove away fast, not noticing the black sedan that followed 2 blocks behind. The next morning, a brown envelope arrived at Lin's door. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note, "For your safety. Deliver this before midnight." They're already watching. He plugged the drive into his old laptop. Disconnected from the network. A single video file appeared, Studio Cam 1023 MP4. The footage was grainy. Time stamped the night of Yu Menglong's death. It showed a dim corridor. The entrance to the recording studio. Yu appeared in frame. Alone, walking quickly. Looking over his shoulder. He entered the room. Moments later, 2 shadows followed, one tall, one smaller. Both wearing gloves. Camera cut out after 12 minutes. Lin replayed it again and again. Noting a flash before the signal died, a burst of light consistent with electrical discharge. Leaned back, horrified. The metallic residue. The shock marks. It all matched. But what truly froze him was the final frame, a glimpse of the taller man's wrist. A silver watch glinting under the light. Recognized it instantly. He had seen that watch before. During the first autopsy. Wrist of Chief Coroner Zhao. The realization hit like a blow. Zhao had been at the scene, or someone wanted Lin to believe he was. Either way, it was enough to expose a conspiracy that reached higher than he ever imagined. That night, he met Han in a dim cafe near the river. She had the photos from the studio, he had the footage. Together, they pieced it all into a single timeline. The device. The residue, the deleted files. Altered report. They killed him, Han said quietly. They rewrote the truth. Lin stared at the window, where rain traced crooked lines down the glass. No. They didn't just kill him. They tested something, and he was the first to die from it. Tested what? I don't know, Lin whispered. Whatever it wasn't meant to leave a mark. Before they could speak further, a black car pulled up outside. Men stepped out. Han's eyes widened. They found us. Lin grabbed the USB, slipped it into his pocket, and whispered, "Go out the back. Don't stop for anyone." They split up and through the alley. footsteps echoing in puddles. Until he reached a bridge. He stopped to catch his breath. Masking the sound of tires approaching. A figure emerged from the fog. "Zhao. You should have listened," Zhao said. His face was pale, voice calm. "Some truths don't belong to the public." He clenched his fists. "You forged the first report. You lied about the cause of death?" "Followed orders," Zhao replied. "You think this was about one singer? You have no idea what you've touched." Lightning flashed. For a moment, Lin saw it, the cold certainty in Zhao's eyes. Without warning, Zhao turned and walked away into the mist. A car door slammed. Silence. Lin stood there, drenched, shaking. USB still in his pocket. He didn't know who was behind Zhao, or why Yu Menglong had to die. But he knew one thing, the truth was no longer buried in the morgue. It was alive. Spreading, unstoppable. Days later, the Herald Post received an anonymous package. Inside, the USB drive. Psychology report. And one line scrawled in black ink, "The body never lies." When the footage was published, the world erupted. Hashtags, protests, demands for justice. The police denied everything, calling it fabrication. The morgue issued a statement claiming the video was digitally altered. But the damage was done. The people had seen too much. Dr. Lin disappeared that week. Saw him leave, and his apartment was found empty. The lights still on. On the wall above his desk, written in red marker, were the words, "Truth decays slowly. It never dies." Months later, a tourist visiting the abandoned studio filmed a strange reflection on the cracked mirror, a faint metallic glimmer, like dust, swirling in the beam of light. The video went viral. Tagged simply, "Yu Menglong case." Where, in the hum of fluorescent lights and the sterile chill of another morgue, another autopsy began, under the same cold glow. Beneath the same silence that had once hidden the truth. This time, the world was watching.